Okay, well, Jose, we're back. So far, we're setting a new record 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
A weekly report on the activities of our campaigns and strategic update. So I just wanted to start, and I know you have some news on this as well. I had a brief conversation today with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, LaRouche's widow and founder of the Schiller Institute, who pointed to a very significant news article or a German magazine, which says apparently the Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief, Colonel Syrskyi, has given 45 days to prepare an offensive in Kharkov and Zaporozhye. And according to the newsletter, active preparations are away. So I'm gonna screen share for a minute to show a map because people uh, tend not to know geography very well, but I want you to see Ukraine, Poland. Here's little Moldova. My Congressman Mike Lawler, who's a raving war fanatic, has a wife from Moldova, and he definitely would blow up the world if he had a chance. Belarus, Lithuania, uh, Latvia, Estonia, and also Kaliningrad, which is a whole other story. But so let me read what this German newsletter, which is said to be quite credible, says. Starting Friday, an air bridge will be established between the United States and Poland for the transportation of armored vehicles and ammunition. Panzer and armored personnel carriers of Swedish, Italian, and German production will be delivered by ship from Romania and Bulgaria, down here, Romania and Bulgaria. Storm Shadow and ATACMS missiles will be stockpiled in Kherson and Dnieper, which you're looking at this over here in Ukraine. Repair workshops will be set up. I guess it's more here. That's Dnipro. Uh, uh, will be set up in underground shopping centers, and field hospitals are going to be prepared. Here's Odessa down here. Field hospitals will be prepared in Odessa, Dnieper, Kharkov, and Nikolaev regions. The hospitals are for 30,000 casualties. Starting Monday, 2,300 doctors and paramedics from Italy, Croatia, Belgium, and the Netherlands are going to be sent to work and train in the field under these conditions. Finland and the Baltic countries will set a limited contingent of military specialists to protect these hospitals from the air and organize electronic warfare. NATO and Western states are preparing their troops to enter Ukraine under the guise of medical personnel and protection personnel. Okay, so I think this is extremely ominous. Helga thought it was a big deal, 30,000 casualties. This is after Macron said that he wanted to send ground troops to Ukraine. I wouldn't put it past the United States. We have the new NDAA bill that passed in the House, at least so far, calling for an automatic conscription of every male in the US from the age of 18 to 24, maybe 26. And they're debating whether or not women will be included in this. And they also are saying it's not just US citizens, anyone. So I think this is extremely ominous and we have to wake people up. But you have more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to share this story that's just it's not necessarily breaking, but there was a, missile strike today here in Crimea where five people, three children were killed at the US. These were ATACMS missiles that were supplied by the United States, and they're holding the Russians being are holding the United States responsible for this. That's pretty scary, actually, because if we just killed three children, five people altogether, and we are responsible for it, given the other escalations that have been going on, not just, of course, what you reported, but also this, and also the terrorist attack that just broke out, I think, an hour and a half ago, which I won't speak too much on because we really don't know what that is. To be reporting on breaking news. All I know is that in Dagestan, a group of terrorists walked into a church and shot one Orthodox priest, one police officer, and held their ground in there as they were also burning the entire church. That's all we know so far. But as we know, terrorist networks around the world are often coordinated from here in Langley and in the UK. And that's probably all I'll say on that. It's definitely coming up on this climate, of course, as the war drive only progresses and gets worse. And the resistance to it, though, is becoming even greater as well. What we're seeing is a sort of lashing out an animal that's bucking before it dies, where it knows its time is coming to an end, so it's only acting more and more desperate. We will be pushed into a war. That I do believe is coming. And this is all just provocation, of course. The missile strikes in Crimea and the Russians blaming this on the United States. They want the Russians to respond. There is a provocation for a war happening here on a grander scale for NATO to actually do something, not just sit there, and for the United States to employ all of its 300 plus military bases around the world, and they want to drag your children into it. I'm 25 years old and I am in the selective service. It'd be interesting if we actually come up in the polls that I might be Richie Torres and all of a sudden I'm drafted into the war. I think that would that then that I wonder if they would draft me or not. But that's the situation that we're in right now. It's a pretty scary situation, and I think everyone needs to wake up and act as we did this week. Diane, maybe you want to talk about what we did this week?
Well, sure. It became very clear that there was an outrageous assault going on in the 16th Congressional District in New York, where Jamal Bowman, who's the incumbent congressman, he's been there, I think, for 2 terms so far, called for a ceasefire. And he hasn't been really fanatical about this. But he called for a ceasefire, and I think they want to make a really ugly example of him. So AIPAC and other super PACs have flooded this district with money. They found a prostitute by the name of George Latimer, who is the Westchester County executive, who agreed to run in the primary against Bowman. And they have, according to the Israeli Times, 700 quote unquote, I say advisedly, volunteers canvassing and trying to make sure there's a massive turnout and Bowman is defeated. Now, we've met some of their volunteers who are actually very well paid and are doing this not because they agree with this, but because they are being paid. But Jose and I decided to wage a campaign to intervene, not because either of us loves Jamal Bowman or AOC. People should really know better than that. Yes, it's good that she called for a ceasefire. We don't want congressmen taken out and replaced by total warmongering APAC stooges because they call for a ceasefire. That's the issue, is the American electoral process. It doesn't mean we're not going to fight these people or intervene in their town hall meetings on their other rotten policies. And certainly neither Jose nor myself is supporting the reelection of the senile president of the United States, Joe Biden. But we have stirred up some controversy clearly. And we were at a rally yesterday in the Bronx. And wasn't that rally in your district, Jose?
That was in my district. You would think, and it wasn't even in AOC's district either, who's also, of course, up for primary reelection. But no, this was in my district, in Richie Torres's district, New York 15, miles away from New York 16. All of the voters of New York 16 are rushing into the Bronx, I suppose. I mean, the voters of New York 16, it's very interesting being in Westchester County this week as we were out there with a statement, both of our statements really being punchy against APAC. And, of course, people just don't understand nuance anymore. Of course, I don't like Bowman, and this is not a get out the vote for Bowman. This is a, hey, if you're upset with the American electoral system and its hijacking, actually, Diane Sare and Jose Vega are two candidates who are uncompromised, who stand on principle, don't take a dime of APAC money, and are in positions right now that can actually be a challenge to the whole corporate lobbying scheme. And we can have some semblance of American electoral politics again if you support our independent campaigns. And I made this point yesterday that the entire democratic infrastructure that gets these people elected, these machines like the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Sunrise Movement, the Justice Democrats, that infrastructure has failed. It just has. If they were actually trying to put up a fight, they would be taking this fight to the streets of New York 16, where they know they are going to get the most resistance and opposition and raise the tension in a
Well,
non-violent way.
I want to say something about that because also Bowman has had difficulty getting venues in his own district. That's how vicious and fascist these genocide apologists are. We know from one of our volunteers who tried to go to a meeting at a church, I think it was in November, it was sometime months ago. So before they'd scraped Latimer out of the toilet bowl or wherever they found him to run, there was a meeting in a church for a ceasefire. Bowman was going to speak. Clearly, the APAC ADL crew pressured the minister. The minister came rushing to the church, shut down the meeting, and threw everybody out. So think about that. A sitting elected congressman cannot hold a meeting in a church in his own district to stop a genocide.
Yeah.
And people say it's wrong to compare the state of affairs to what went on in Germany in the 1930s.
Absolutely. No, exactly. And that's the thing. If Bowman was actually a competent congressman, he would realize that his race has international implications because international publications have been writing about this. Haaretz has been writing about his race too. But see, and also people kind of need to get out of their bubble for a second and realize something. One of the elements of this is that they're spending $25 million in this district. It doesn't actually involve Bowman at all. This is not about Jamal Bowman because he really isn't a threat at the end of the day. What people need to think, though, is what are the implications if George Latimer actually wins this thing on an international scale? Will the United States feel more comfortable in their agenda of aiding Israel in the genocide that's going on because of the fact that Latimer can win? All of the congressmen who are existing right now, who might have been on the fence as to whether or not they can support the Israel line of attack in Gaza, will say, well, the losing position is to call for a ceasefire. So people need to think about all kinds of ways in which the State Department is trying to manipulate public perception, and they are using this race. This is why Richie Torres, my opponent, has said, well, Mr. Bowman, we will see how much Jewish support you really have on June 25th. And my opponent has been making all kinds of snide remarks saying, well, unlike you, Mr. Bowman, I will enjoy continuing being a congressman. Well, we'll see what happens in November. But regardless, this is beyond Bowman. This is not about saving the guy. People should investigate. George Soros lives in the district. Hillary Clinton's right next door. What is it about that district in Westchester County? And I'll just share one anecdote. A elected official in Mount Vernon, who will remain nameless right now, told me to my face, you need to go back to the Bronx because there's a reason why Westchester County ain't a part of the five boroughs. You ain't ready for this place. That's what she told me to my
Wow.
face. And it's like, what
Wow.
kind of mobster movie did I just walk into? Right. But see, she was projecting a surface level kind of corruption going on. And you see there's something else happening there that we accidentally uncovered just being on the streets of New York 16. And this goes way beyond one congressman or another. This is a national, international conspiracy, and we uncovered it. And people should keep digging about
Well,
that.
I just want to say that this also doesn't have only to do with Gaza or getting a ceasefire, but if we're about to send a bunch of American troops to die in Ukraine fighting Russia, which is what it sounds like, or if we're all about to be annihilated in a thermonuclear war because of the moronic arrogance of our State Department intelligence officials and our subservience to the British, the King of England once again here, they need the Congress to go along. So the point is very much like that of a public lynching of Congressman Bowman, which is to send a message: you toe the line. You toe the line or you will be destroyed. That's why we're trying to get the voters to get off their rear ends, to stop being small-minded. You think the situation is bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet compared to what this war could become. And that is why Jose and I are fighting as we are, and why this is such an important battle, and why we decided it's not Jose's district. Of course, my district is the whole state, but I have plenty of ground to cover in the state. I don't have to spend 5 days in the 16th congressional district. We're doing this as a kind of proof of principle, and also to help concerned citizens learn how to fight. And I will say Lyndon LaRouche was the greatest fighter around. How do you know that? Because they wouldn't let him get near the White House. They put him in jail for 5 years in order to make sure that that didn't happen. They shut down all of his publications, and they sent 400 FBI agents and US Marshals to raid his home and his office in 1986. So we used to have a sticker, which I will tell everyone there you should consider. It said, don't say nasty things about LaRouche unless you've got something to hide. And there was a reason for that, because we do our job, we do our intelligence, and we also learn a lot by, you try to do something good, and then you see who attacks you, and then you begin to know how the enemy works.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and we found that out yesterday at the rally, of course, that they didn't let us in, or they didn't let me in. Actually, the security
Well,
at the
anyone with any semblance, anyone with a V.
Oh yeah, so the security told the volunteers, anyone wearing a Vega for Congress hat or shirt, no Vega, nothing here. They were explicitly told, and so a lot of my volunteers and staffers were rejected on the basis that they were wearing a hat or a shirt. And I told one of my volunteers, just say someone gave you the hat, you're not, and they still wouldn't let them in. It's kind of sad actually, but it has nothing to do with the fact that we've intervened before. Well, maybe it has, but really, it's the fact that we actually have real substance. You know, they know what leaflet we've been giving out. They understand that we've been trying to fight against AIPAC, and they don't want that told. They don't want that told because they're afraid to speak out, actually. That's what it is. And that's what's caused all this division with the gang, counter gang stuff, is the fact that they've been cowardly to actually go up against Joe Biden and tell the truth, or even tell the truth about the Ukraine war. So
Now, I do want to bring up something else, because President Putin has been doing incredible diplomacy. First of all, on June 14th, he gave a very lengthy speech at the Foreign Ministry where he laid out a peace plan for Ukraine, but it wasn't merely the peace plan for Ukraine, which was in the last few pages of the speech, which is all, of course, the stupid news media covered, and they barely covered that. But what he laid out was his vision for an entirely new strategic architecture, very much along the lines of what Helga LaRouche has been calling for, and along the lines of what Jose and I would support in the Congress, which is to recognize every nation has an equal stake, an equal right to sovereignty, an equal right to security, and any new architecture of security must respect that. We don't want something like George Orwell's 1984. Well, we're all equal, but some are more equal than others. No, you will never get to peace if that occurs. So he what Putin laid out was actually, frankly, very reasonable, very even-handed. Some people were surprised he's not making a claim in Odessa, but he's talking about a peace plan in the context of this new global architecture. Then he went to North Korea and signed a major military agreement with North Korea, really mutual defense between Russia and North Korea, including sharing certain kinds of technology with North Korea. And then he traveled to Vietnam, where in a press conference at the end of his visit, he said things that I found, actually calm, but quite alarming, because this nuclear war threat is really serious. And there still are people in the US who not either don't get it at all or who think it's survivable. And what Putin said when he was asked, well, are you considering changing your nuclear doctrine, your no first use? And he said, well, we don't need to do that now because we still have the capability of delivering and annihilating retaliatory strike. Therefore, we still have deterrence because it's known that we can obliterate NATO, the NATO countries, in a second strike. However, what's not said but implied is if the situation were to change, for example, the US and NATO, the US backing Ukraine, the UK backing Ukraine, knocks out Russia's early warning detection systems so that a second strike becomes more difficult or impossible, then you have a situation where Russia might feel obliged to, I don't know, do a first strike. I think they don't want to do a first strike, but some kind of asymmetric response, knock out commercial satellites, do something else. They will have to do that. They will have to do that. And I think part of Putin's travels is to see if he can get anyone in the West to realize that he's serious.
I mean, Russia's nuclear doctrine is pretty clear. They'll use it if they feel as if they're under existential threat. And knocking out an early detection radar system, what other purpose would you do that for if you weren't planning on doing something like a nuclear strike on a country? I would take that as an existential threat to my country, which is, and I mean, with all these little provocations going on in Russia by the US and the West, we should all be very happy that Putin is actually a very patient and level-headed person. But I think it also comes with the fact that the Russians, the Chinese, a lot of countries abroad know that the people wouldn't stand for this if they knew what was going on. And they know and trust in people and activists to tell the truth. They know that a lot more Americans know the truth about this. And they know that there are people inside these countries trying to fight for a better government, fighting for them to be held accountable. And I think that's what's been the biggest deterrent in this entire situation is the fact that there is resistance against the government. There is resistance within these against these oligarchical forces, and it requires us to only keep that resistance going.
Right. So I think we should wrap up. Do you have anything you want to say in conclusion?
People should donate to Diane's campaign at sareforsenate.com.
And people should donate to Jose's campaign at votevega.nyc. And you will be seeing more of us, and we're going to make it to 3 weeks in a row, and you will be able to rely on hearing from us every Sunday. Talk to you soon.